Good afternoon and welcome back to Mellick on Site. Today I'm going to show you how to repair and replace a cement for stairs. I'm going to show you the tools that I have, and then it's going to be just like the siding one where I'll stop it and pause it and do the work, and then unpause the video and show you what I've done. So you won't see me doing all the work, but you'll see me starting off with a little bit of it so we get the idea. That way you're not sitting here watching me just work and you can move on with your life a little bit quicker. So today I have some cement here and the steps are gone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a form and brace that up, and I'm going to clean out the rotten cement with a broom, and I'll cut the form with a jigsaw. I will drill holes into the current cement with a hammer drill and put metal rod into the cement for added durability. That way the cement has something to adhere to the old cement with. And I have an angle grinder to cut off the metal rod after I bend it around. That way it's not just one huge long stick. The cement that I'm using is just a concrete mix from Sackcrete. It's just a high strength concrete mix. I'll have a bucket of water to stir it up in, and that's what we're going to do. So my first step is going to be to clean out the rotten cement and all the dirt and crap. That way when I mix up the new cement, it has a clean surface to adhere to. So I'm going to start off with using the broom. I'm going to pause this and I'll come right back. Okay, well I just finished out cleaning out all the rubble from the brick or from the cement. I'm going to show that to you, and then my next step is to take my hammer drill and drill in some holes for the re-rod, and I'll use the hammer or hatchet to drive the re-rod into the hole and go from there. So I'm going to show you the cleaned up step, and then I'm going to use the hammer drill on one hole. That way you can see what I'm doing, and then I'll drill the other holes, and then I'll unpause the video. So here is the step, and it's all cleaned up. There's a little bit that's still loose in there, but it's, for the most part, I'm down to everything solid, which is good. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to use the hammer drill and drill a hole, so that way I can put the re-rod in there and go from there. The purpose of the re-rod is to give the cement something to adhere to. It also allows it to adhere to the old cement around it, and it gives it more added strength. So I'm going to drill some more holes here. I'll be right back with you. Alright, so I've drilled some holes and I've got my rod here. I've put it in the hole. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it around, and then I'm going to cut it off with the angle grinder. So I'm going to show you how I'm bending it and cutting it off, and then I'll put the other re-rod into the holes so that way you can see how that looks at the end. So here's how one piece of re-rod looks in the hole. I'll cut it off and then unpause it from there. Just take it, shove it in the hole, hit it in a few times with the hammer. That way you know it's in tight. You're just going to take it and bend it around in there, so that way everything's hidden. Take your grinder, grind that off. You have to be cautious because that is hot there, so you don't want to touch that. And I'm going to sink in about 4 or 5 more pieces of steel into that hole. Alright, so I've got all the re-rod or steel stuck into the hole here. I'll show you here. I've got 3 pieces sitting here, and they all kind of just go every which way, and that's to help lock in the aggregate to the concrete. Concrete has more of a has more compaction strength than it does lateral strength, and so that's why you add the steel into it, is to give it more lateral strength. Concrete also has an average lifespan, if mixed up correctly, of about 80 years. Concrete is its strongest when it's kept underwater. That's why concrete bridge piers are super strong. There is still concrete in the Hoover Dam that is not hardened yet. And that's just a little bit of history on concrete. Anyway, my next step is to take and make a form across the front of the stairs. That way when I pour the concrete in, it doesn't just flood out onto the stair below it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this piece of engineered wood here, and I'm going to cut it down to length using the jigsaw of the stairs, and it'll set in the front of the stairs, kind of like that, right at the top. So that's my next step, and I will resume the video once I've got that in place. All right, I have my form in place. On this house, I did not secure it to anything. Instead, I just locked it in with bricks. It's going to take about 7 days for the concrete to cure, so before they can pull the mold out or pull that board off for the form. So these bricks will have to sit here for 7 days. I'm going to pick the camera up and show it to you, and then I've got some water running, and I'll start mixing up cement. So here is what the form looks like when it's in place. It's just held up along there with those boards, and now I've got my concrete here, so I'm going to get this set up so I can mix some concrete for you. Alright, so mixing up concrete, you're going to dump a little bit in here. And then you're going to add some water here once the dust clears. And you want it to be a consistency of that of like pancake mix or oatmeal. So I've got this here. I'll show you what it looks like right here in there. Just got kind of a watery mix. I'm going to start stirring it up, and then I'll show it to you here in a second. You always want to have the concrete mixed. You always add the Portland cement and then the water. You never dump the concrete into the water, because if you have too much water, there is no undo or redo. What I'm doing here is I'm just mixing this up. Trying to get it all stirred up in here. And I did add a little bit too much water, which is okay, because I can just add a little bit more concrete. Safety with this, you don't want to get wet concrete on your hands, as it does have a tendency for people with sensitive skin to eat their skin. So you always want to have water running nearby, which is why the hose is still running and putting water into this person's yard. I'm still mixing this up. I'm going to have to add a little bit more concrete here, as it's still pretty soupy. So now we're getting to a consistency where it's going to look like oatmeal mix or pancake batter on there. Just kind of drips off. So I'm going to add just a little bit more concrete to make sure it's not too thinly mixed. And then I'm going to dump it into the hole. And in doing that this time, I added too much water, or too much concrete, so I'm going to need If you do add too much concrete, then you go, at this point, you just want to add splashes of water. Here's what we've got right here for a mix. It looks about right. So we're going to call that good. I'm going to dump it in the hole. because if it's too watery, it's going to run out of the bottom of the form, and the form's not doing me any good. Okay, I'm going to take my rod here, and I'm going to tamp it down or kind of aerate it out. That way it allows for the concrete to get in, and so that way there's no air pockets. So I'm going to pause this again and finish pouring this, and then I'll let you see the final product as I float it out. Alright, so I've got this concrete filled or poured. I'm going to go ahead and rod this down a little bit, and you can see how it's just taking it and allowing the concrete to drop in a little more. Then they do make specialty tools called trowels and edgers for your concrete work. If this is something that you're going to get into, you probably want to buy those specialty tools. This is not something that I do all the time, so I'm just going to use a block of wood. I'm going to float it out and use this to get all the rocks kind of smashed in there and pull it straight so that way it looks nice. And you can see how that's floating out very nicely. This front edge, I'm going to take this board here and I'm going to angle it so that way I don't have a sharp edge there. And I'll come back in and just pull this nice and tight. I'll try and come back. I've got to add a little bit of more concrete around the edges here as I have a dip there. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, finish this up, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, so I finished floating out the top of the cement with my board. Remember, once again, if you were doing this, you'd use a trowel. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up my tools. Clean up with concrete is just water. You can clean up with water, and it's like it was never there. So right now, if I come over here on the stairs that I've just did all this work on with a garden hose and soak it down, the concrete will dilute itself, and it will no longer be concrete. It'll just be rocks and sand. But here's a picture of this as it's all finished, and you can see how it's floated in. The more that you take it and float it out with your tool, the more of the Portland that comes up to the surface and the rocks settle down, and you get a nice smooth look with it. This one here, it's kind of hard to get it to look smooth just due to the steps and all of what's going on there. But I did use a little bit of the extra and put it on the step up here just to kind of fill that hole. The homeowner right now, they're planning on replacing the entire walkway within the next year. So this was just something to make it safe for the mailman or mailwoman to come up to the steps. So my next step is to clean off my tools and clean up my workspace and fold it up. But just kind of recap of what we did. Today we used a hammer drill to drill in the holes to this cement to put in the re-rod or steel. Then we used an angle grinder to cut off the steel after we bent it to the length and bent it to the size and the shape that we wanted it to fill the hole. The purpose of the steel was to give the concrete something to hold on to, as concrete has really good compaction strength but no lateral strength. We also learned that concrete has a typical lifespan of about 80 years, but it can deteriorate faster depending on conditions and how strong it was originally set up to be. We also learned the strongest concrete that you'll find is underwater, and that the concrete, some of the concrete inside the Hoover Dam has still not yet hardened. We also learned that the form that I've used here, and I'll show that to you again real quick, the form right here, right next to my leg, that's just a piece of composite board, and you can use a regular board or whatever, and it will come off in 7 days. If it is pulled off earlier than 7 days, then the concrete inside at the bottom of where I just filled it, it has not hardened yet. Now some people will say, well, what if it's going to rain tomorrow? Do I need to cover it? You don't need to cover it if it's not going to rain for the first 12 hours. After that, if it's going to be like a torrential downpour, then you do want to cover it. But if it's just going to mist, then you want to cover it. Also, on the flip side, if you pour concrete and it's 90 degrees, you do want to mist it and put a tarp over it to help hold that moisture in. If concrete dries out too fast, then it won't fully cure and it'll actually crack and split. If concrete, on the flip side of that, if concrete takes too long to cure, so it's too cold, then it won't cure right as well. So those are the two different things on concrete. Right now it's supposed to be in the neighborhood. It may rain tomorrow, may not, but it's not a big deal. The concrete will be held up overnight long enough. If it's going to be a torrential downpour, I'll leave a sheet of plastic that they can put over it just to help it not get soaked out. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video on how to mix up concrete. Remember, it should look like a pancake mix or an oatmeal. There's a chemical in it that can eat your hands. It does hurt some sensitive people. And that's that. Thank you for your time. Have a good one.